Welcome to the Inquisitive Wren podcast. I'm Sha, your host. Join us as we explore diverse perspectives on the human experience, offering insightful interviews and deep reflections on philosophy, spirituality, psychology, from a bird's eye view on the essence of being. Alisa, thank you so much for joining me. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Now, I want to talk to you about your work. You do so many different things, but I thought we might focus on trauma because I don't know about you, but I think since COVID, and probably before that as well, there's certain buzzwords on social media, on the internet. I think the ones that stand out at the moment, narcissism, it's the word's everywhere. Trauma, boundaries, everybody's talking about boundaries. So there's certain things that used to be sort of secluded in a therapist's office or, in that therapeutic space. And now it's everywhere. But you work specifically as a psychotherapist, but you really do help a lot of people to deal with trauma. So can you tell the viewers, the listeners, what is trauma? And also, do you think all trauma can be treated?
Yes, I feel like, it's pop psychology that we know. A lot of things are being misused in certain ways. And I feel like sometimes we have to look at how and what way we're impacted by our life experiences. Because now I feel like we're getting more understanding of what trauma really is and how does it or is it being stored within our body. And there's a beautiful book called The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Mate, and he talks about trauma and what is the definition of that and what are the characteristics of having that as well. So trauma, and I agree with his statement on that, it's not just things that we, let's say, become victims of, right? It's not just sexual abuse. It doesn't have to be any traumatic situation, let's say a combat veteran, right? Or anything else like a survivor of any type of experiences that can be considered really, really, really intense. And it's certain events that happen in our lives that are impeding our progress, something that is preventing us from functioning to the full extent. Let's say it doesn't have to be that we are completely isolated or avoidant or are in fear of getting to people, but sometimes we're not able to form those connections with others that are meaningful, fulfilling. Sometimes it's those days when we get too impacted by our work, when the work is not even that stressful. Maybe again there's that trauma underneath all that. So I feel like understanding first, how is my well-being altogether? How is my functioning? Is it all at the level of, let's say, if we rate ourselves from 0 to 10, what's my emotional health, physical health, mental health, right? Spiritual health. That's a huge part of our lives as well right now. And I feel like if we're honest with ourselves and we look at those areas that may be impacted in one way or another, we may not know that it's trauma yet, right? But if we look at that and say, you know what, I don't think I'm at full capacity in this area. Maybe it's like a physical. I have troubles getting out of the house, or working out is very hard for me, or yoga is hard for me, or maybe it's mental health. Maybe I feel overly anxious, or maybe I feel a little low energy. We don't attribute that to trauma, but it also can be the antecedent to that. So I feel like becoming honest and aware of what we are going through and how is our daily functioning can be a great way to start to see if there may be a trauma underneath all that.
Thank you for that. So, Anita, so when we talk about trauma, so I'm going to relate it to maybe like a physical injury. So a medical professional might say you've had a blunt trauma. Let's say you've had a fall and you hit your head. So you've now got a blunt trauma to the head. And perhaps that will be treated with an x-ray, maybe an MRI might be needed, but there may be a plaster on it, there could be dressing, there could be medication applied, there could be lots of things applied. So that happened because the person fell, they weren't able to stop themselves, and their head was unprotected. So now that part of the body is affected. when we talk about mental health, how would somebody obtain a trauma?
It's a great question. And I feel like now we're very fortunate to have much more information on how trauma is stored within the body because it's not just a mental process, it's also a physiological response to that. Just like if we're thinking about, I always compare that to watching a scary movie, right? You're not just getting scared mentally, you experience fear. You get a physiological response to something very intense. So we're having the response to positive experiences too. If we get scared, right? If we get that anxious response of a shock, we have heart palpitation, we have, our body begins to shiver, we may have indigestion, we may have high blood pressure, maybe we're going into sympathetic dominance, we're going into fight or flight response. It's not just mental, we experience that physiologically. And what happens during that moment is our neurons fire and wire together internally, creating this negative neural connection that associated with the same emotions and sensations of the experience, but also negative belief about ourselves. And so that's a very tricky point because we have, if we will look at our system, we're going to simplistically call it, we have the top brain and the bottom brain. The top brain is the one that's explicit memory that I comprehend information and make judgment. But down there in the bottom brain, we have implicit memories. It's how we responded to those life experiences. And that's where the trick is because top brain and the bottom brain have no communication. And in the bottom brain, there is no logic as well. So if in the future we are to get the triggers to the same experience that created this negative neural network and negative physiological response, it's triggering the system that we have no access, consciously. So we respond to a trigger, but we don't even know why we're responding that way. People can react or have, I've had clients who would out of nowhere have panic attacks. Like, I don't know, I've never had that, I don't know why. But in reality, there's so many experiences that already created this negative neural network. So now when it's triggered, we're going into the sympathetic response. We get this kind of either anxiety or panic attacks or any other kind of unpleasant circumstance or consequences. But we don't see why this was happening because it's absolutely out of our conscious awareness. And understanding how trauma is created within the body, just like positives do, right? If we are falling in love, it's not just mental, right? We have the butterflies in our stomach, we feel all of this uplift, we have goosebumps. So it goes both ways. But unfortunately, negative experiences create a very kind of firm and long lasting connections that are very hard to address because we're not looking internally. We're looking to talk therapy, right? That's what a lot of people do. And I feel like right now we're coming to this new era where we become more aware of how to work with our physiology. We have somatic work, we have EMDR. I love it. It changed everything for me as far as how to work with clients. So I absolutely am a fan of it. I went and I did it for myself too, because I understood some of my problems, right? We are so fortunate right now to have the tools that we have.
What you're saying really is, as I described, the physical trauma, it would be, for instance, you call it negative life experiences. So somebody could experience a very negative event. And for many people, it starts very young, but it doesn't have to be. You could be an older person in a work situation, and maybe for the first time you're being bullied. Now, for
Yes.
you, that would be traumatic if you've never
Mm-hmm.
had that before. So it doesn't always have to be in childhood. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like what you're saying is yes, there is an impact. That negative experience
Absolutely.
is an impact. If it weren't an impact, if it weren't significant enough, then it wouldn't be a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It'd just be another experience that maybe you didn't like, but it didn't create a trauma. So I think that's
Yes.
what you were saying. That's really important for people to know because
Mm-hmm.
we're in the age of self-diagnosis. Everyone wants to self-diagnose. I'm a little
Mm-hmm.
bit OCD. I'm a little bit ADHD. Everybody wants to self-diagnose. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
when people say, "Oh yes, I have trauma," we need to know what that is. And I think seeing somebody like yourself, seeing a professional can help you to work out,
Mm-hmm.
is this a trauma or was this just an experience you didn't like? But how is it affecting, as you would describe, how is it affecting your life
Yes.
now? Now,
Yes.
you mentioned some modalities, EMDR, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for those out there who haven't heard CBT before. I have
Hmm.
had one person say, "What is CBT?" So I don't think we can always assume that everybody knows these terms.
Yes.
Can you tell everyone what EMDR stands for? And I'm with you 100%. I love the therapy. I was trained in it as well. But I
Hmm.
was trained when they were using the back and forth thing, when we were doing that, and we had
Yeah.
lights and they were going back and forth. Now you don't have to do all of that. But tell everybody what EMDR stands for and what it is.
Right. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So basically, just like we spoke about earlier about the top brain and the bottom brain, right? So the idea is to try to get to this negative neural network that's been created by emotions, sensations, right? Physiological response, and trying to dig deeper to see what the core belief about ourselves is now from that event that happened. And so it can be anything from I'm unsafe, I'm unlovable, I'm abandoned, I'm alone, I'm unimportant, my needs don't matter, and I'm powerless, hopeless, helpless. It can be a lot of things that situations can create. And just like you spoke earlier, that not everybody is going to experience trauma from some unpleasant experience. That's exactly why we're all different and we are prone to different things and we have different sensitivity level when it comes to abandonment, for instance, right? Or betrayal. And right now, there's so many things that are in the world that are very hard to kind of fathom. And when we go through them, like again, creating romantic relationships right now is extremely hard. I've seen, and I work with people, and it's a very kind of difficult journey. So I feel like understanding how a certain experience can impact me, myself, and how it did impact, I feel like it's important to first start with that. And if we see that my life is not, I'm not living my life to the fullest, that I'm struggling in one area, it can be a good idea to address that and see where that can be stemming from, even if it's not immobilizing you but just impeding the process. I feel like it's still worth to go and try to give it a shot. And so with EMDR, we're trying to get into the bottom brain from the top brain, right? So the top brain has this explicit memories, explicit experiences where I can say, okay, that's when it happened at this age. This happened. My boyfriend left me at this age. This, I was fired at this time. But what's repressed is how did I deal with that and what happened? How did I feel through that experience? And that's what we're trying to go into and break down those neural connections, those negative neural network. So how does it happen? So when we go to bed and we go to sleep and we get into REM sleep that we all know, when the eyes begin to move a little bit, that's literally the part of our brain that's called hippocampus begin to put memory in different compartments. This is family, this is great, this was fun, and this was something really, really intense. And I don't want to, I need to preserve myself. I need to go into this survival mode. And the brain is like, that's too much information to process. So let me repress it. It's not about repressing the parts of the experience, even sometimes it is so, but it's about kind of putting in a compartment somewhere far away. How did I struggle through that? How painful that was, how devastating that was. And so it puts it away. But again, when we're talking about that, it's not just about not remembering it at all. And sometimes we have, let's say, an injury, an open wound. I like to give this metaphor. And let's say this wound heals successfully on top, and I don't see any, I have a little bit of a scar. I'm like, okay, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. But underneath all that, there is infection, an infection wound that continues to influence my health. And so I get inflammation, I have fever, but I look at my hand, right? I'm like, oh, well, there's just a scar. It's all fine, but it's really not. And so what EMDR helps us with is to reactivate the brain through eye movement, through fast eye movement or tapping, or we have the buzzers. There's a lot of different tools that people use nowadays, and try to activate the brain while we focus on those sensations, emotions, and the belief that we will identify prior to the session of processing, and then try and allow our brain to release the tension surrounding that. Is that the best way how I can put it? And so it begins to break down, but allowing us to relive that in certain way and to face certain things that we did feel. That's why sometimes people may go into this a little more heightened state, even though they're starting, if we're measuring that from 0 to 10, and they're starting at 7, and then suddenly they go into 10. And they're like, well, it's making you worse. No, it's showing you what you have inside that you haven't addressed. And so this becomes a very powerful journey, but it's not easy. That's why there's a lot of preparation for that. And it's important to have rapport with your therapist, because that's the person who's going to be there with you as well. So I feel like there's so many components to picking the right person for this work, and also being ready to address that, because it's not going to be comfortable in a lot of ways. but it's very rewarding to get to the state where you break down the negative neural network and you help to cover it up or reestablish a more adaptive neural network that allows you to not have this muddy lens through which we look at the world. Because once the trauma is created, and let's say if I have an underneath belief that I'm unsafe, then that's how I'm looking at life from this point on. So this belief, it's not conscious, right? But it begins to drive my life forward. And so I'm going into the world and then I look at a person, I like the person, I'm like, but no, I'm unsafe to do that. I'm not going to go and make that connection. Or I'm not going to go and try to take that job interview, right? To do that job interview. So I feel like it may impact how do we deal with life after this event has happened. And if we break that down and we reestablish some and say, I can control what I can, even when I'm powerless or even when I'm helpless. Or I know I can find or protect myself in any situation, right? I can find ways to protect myself. Or there can be so many different, more positive beliefs that we can reestablish on top of that. But yeah, it's hard work. And I know it's a lot and it's intense for certain people. That's why we take our time with that. And there's a lot of preparation and somatic work to help people ground and self-regulate, which I love doing, and cognitive behavioral therapy too, working on thoughts that we have, trying to get to also certain experience and certain underlying core beliefs can be also very useful, especially ahead of time before that EMDR session.
Never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button right now. Thank you for your support. You make this podcast possible. Now, back to the show.
And why do you think that trauma is very different for some people? For instance, two people could experience the exact same negative event. One is traumatized by it, and the other one is just a negative event. They're not impacted.
Well, we're all very diverse, and all of the experiences before that counts, our sensitivity, our proneness to certain things too, and maybe even beliefs before this event has happened. We can have two children from the same household, and let's say if one has a connection with let's say grandmother, and they're very close, and that person becomes everything for the child, but then the other child is more connected with her parents, and then suddenly when the grandmother dies, for that child who was very connected to that's going to be a tragedy. And maybe her belief before was, well, this is the most important person in my life, and I'm not going to be okay without that. What am I going to do? So this kind of belief system, right, can lead you to be in bed and not wanting to do anything else and struggling to process this experience, while the other child can cry, can grieve, but then it's like, oh, I have other support system. I have my parents, I have my friends. So, and we are all different, even when we come from the same household. So I feel like understanding that there's big beauty in us being different, but also we have certain vulnerabilities that other people may not have, even coming from the same family. So it's a lot of factors, I feel like, when it comes to, understanding the diversity of our beings here. So
yes, absolutely. I think that's right. I would agree. Everybody's different, and depending on how you viewed it, how you experienced it, and our experiences can differ. And that's the beauty of having autonomy, being an individual, all of that. Twins, I love a lot of the research out there around twins and having the same, obviously the same everything, but can be very polar opposite in many ways. There's lots of research out there. How does one start to recognize trauma?
I feel like first becoming more self-aware, and that can be a process for a lot of people. So number one, when we spoke about starting to be more vigilant about, am I happy in my life? Everything is great, because if it's not, you'll probably be kind of already a little bit aware of that. Is just being honest with yourself and assessing yourself in the right way. Is it the life that I live? Is it fulfilling, meaningful? Am I happy? Right? Asking certain questions, and can I improve it? And if you're trying to improve it and let's say you're not able to, right, that can be a good sign. If you experience certain symptoms, again, I'm not saying you can be diagnosed with depression. Oh, I'm so depressed, but it can be just one little aspect of it, right? So I feel like becoming aware of in what way your life right now is impacted negatively, if there's anything that's kind of that you don't like or you don't feel comfortable with. And again, we're environmentally wired. So sometimes it's the environment we live in. So sometimes maybe removing certain things or certain aspects of your environment can already create that relief. But sometimes it's a little more tricky and complicated. And if we find ourselves that we're overly anxious, or I'm not able to do the things that I used to do that I loved before, we have to be honest and be more open-minded to, because I know not a lot of people actually will say, I believe in mental health. I have certain people, and I came from Russia as well. So mental health, you don't have depression. That's impossible. It doesn't exist, right? Or anxiety. Right now, I feel like we've become a little more aware of that, but for certain cultures, it can be a long way until we can admit that, yeah, mental health is a real deal and there are ways to address that. So I feel like first becoming more self-aware, then the next step, and I always say self-awareness, then willingness to change. That's the second step, but it's not the most important one yet, because willingness is only saying, and I'm admitting to myself, I have a problem. And I want to deal with that because I don't like my life right now and what it is. I don't know what's causing that. I don't know the reason for it, but I'm willing to take steps forward to solving this problem. And then the third one is readiness, because things may be getting very uncomfortable. We have to put effort in, right? And we have to dedicate time. We have to stay consistent with that. And not a lot of people are willing to do that. And that's a very important stage as well to solving the issue and treating the trauma if we're able to identify that we have one. So I feel like it's a journey of self-exploration and being honest with yourself as well, and getting that help that you may need if you're willing and ready. But again, it may take some time and some soul searching to really realize that we're impacted by something in our life and what it is. And I feel like sometimes people also deny themselves of getting that treatment because, like, well, nothing bad has happened. I've never been abused. I've never been this or that. You don't need those experiences to have an experienced trauma. And that's a very important aspect for a lot of people to recognize as well. Even like you've mentioned about the senior gentleman, right, being, having issues and being bullied at work, that can be, he's already vulnerable population. He can already have certain sensitivities and vulnerabilities, and then that happens, and that can be a very rough experience for someone. Just like, being betrayed by a friend or having a breakup with someone you loved when you never had anybody important leaving your life, that can be a very traumatic experience as well. So I feel like it doesn't have to be something too intense in order for us to be impacted by the unpleasant experiences of our lives.
You're listening to the Inquisitive Wren podcast, the show that brings you philosophical ponderings of your life from a bird's eye view. Now, here's your host, Sha.
That is such a good point. Very good. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because people do believe that it has to be this huge, big thing. There's a lot of talk around abuse, and people often say, well, I was never abused. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. It doesn't have to be what you might perceive to be a trauma. There are other things that can impact you depending on your consistency and how you deal with things. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And even if we have the coping skills to deal with that, because sometimes we do have certain coping skills, and that's how some people are able to utilize it. Again, for instance, if it's a painful breakup or, something of that sort, maybe a family member is dying or certain experiences that can be, it's natural part of life. However, it may affect us in a way of a trauma as well. But if I have good, solid social support system, then I can turn there, and that can bring me some kind of, relief from that experience, or a new perspective, or help me not to close off and, be in this kind of, traumatic space afterwards. But sometimes we don't have those coping skills because we never had to experience that. And that can be something brand new and very unknown and uncertain. And I feel like a lot of people nowadays, we don't like uncertainty. We don't like changes. But when they happen, that can be a very rough kind of time to process that and to make sense of it and to move forward. So even small things can create a very big negative impact, and just being open about it. And maybe, again, just trying to get some help and see if there is anything that I can learn, if it's not working, directly with like EMDR or source of the trauma. Maybe it's learning some coping skills that will be useful at this time, and so processing this little kind of traumatic experiences in a positive way and gaining strength. Because I feel like what I love about it may sound a little weird, but I love trauma because trauma is the way that helps us grow. And we can, if we surpass something that was so traumatic, we are we're doing amazing. And this can become a greatest thing. And again, I understand there are some really, really tough experiences people can go through, but I also believe that everything's here for a reason and for our growth. So we allow ourselves to see them that way rather than feeling victimized from certain experiences. We can gain so much empowerment through this and to become we're always becoming and to become even stronger. I always say like Sha 2.0 or whoever I'm working with, I'm like, you're going to be the 2.0 version or 3.0 version now. Is it unpleasant? No, but life will always give us those experiences to grow because we don't look back and say, oh my God, I was so happy. I grew so much. We never say that. When we're happy, we're enjoying life. But growing process and learning about ourselves and becoming the better versions of ourselves comes from very bad kind of experiences and things that we have to navigate that sometimes we question if I will be able to surpass that. Yes, you will. Yes, you will. And you will come out so much more beautiful and empowered and stronger and better that you will look back and say, I'm glad I've had that because now I've learned something new, and then life always brings and always rewards us. We just have to have that faith and trust that it's gonna work out.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. Because some people think it's so big, nobody's going to be able to deal with my stuff. And why should I even go to a therapist? It's so big. People can see their issues as so big, and it might serve them for a while to think that. But that brings me over to therapy itself. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you have heard or found about therapy?
Actually, I've had one myself a long time ago when I went for it was 2000, I think 11 or 12 or something like that, and that was my first introduction to be working with a therapist. And I went in and the person did not understand me at all, and I was like, wow, how can you not even see what's happening and not give me the right, like it was no connection. And I feel like that's the number one thing is when we're going to a mental health professional and it's not working out, we put a big, taboo on anything going forward. But it's the same way as going, to find a nail manicurist, right? Or a hairdresser. It's not going to be the first person that we meet. We have to do some soul searching to find the person who will be aligning with you and maybe, again, being more aware of their background, modalities they use, right? Because I feel like first we need to know, what do I want to experience? What are some things that align with my own perspective? Because again, I do, let's say, utilize a lot of spirituality. Some people may not like that, and that's completely fine. We're going to work with the science-based things. We're going to do talk therapy. We're going to target the mental health specifically, but some people want that and they want to go into this kind of realm that's very different from the standard approaches or like clinical setting kind of thing. And I feel like right now we're becoming more and more open to a lot of different ways of what can work because a lot of areas begin to kind of intertwine together. And so I feel like touching base, I mean, we don't have to really go into spirituality to see ourselves as a miracle or to utilize placebo effect, right? That's something that's written in medical journals. And yet this is a phenomenal kind of experience to change yourself with just your belief. It's magic if we think about it. This is a beautiful kind of experience to realize that we can create changes within ourselves that are healing even medical conditions by just believing that we're being healed. So again, we don't have to go to spirituality to experience spiritual concepts, even in a clinical approach. But I feel like first, again, learning about different people and knowing that even if it's not going to work the first time with the first therapist I'm going to go to, I'm going to still continue trying to find the right person. And that's why, again, consultation calls can be good so that you can hear the person. You can see if you actually feel like this person can be of service for you or can understand you, because I didn't have that option. I didn't have the first consultation. And so that's number one. Then again, giving it some time. If we're working on trauma, I feel like sometimes we want a quick fix. And I know some people may say, well, I feel better right now. Like I feel better the next day. Well, how did you get there? Well, I don't know. I just feel better. Well, feeling better out of nowhere, that can collapse exactly the same way as it was brought upon. So I feel like knowing that it's going to take time to establish that, and it's going to be hard work. It's not just, therapist is not doing anything by giving you what they know and being of support. You have to put in the work. So that's another thing, knowing that I will have to do my part in this process. And that's the collaboration. It's not just the therapist fixing your problems. That never is the cause and the effect of, therapy for you. But I feel like that's another one. And medications. I also have a lot of people who may go on medication and think that, okay, this is going to solve my issue. It is not. It helps your brain, your chemicals in your brain to regulate so that those things you are doing, those coping skills you're learning and utilizing daily are actually working better. Because now we know with depression, certain parts of the brain can be in a way of rigidity. They may not be working as well. That's why it takes so much time for people with depression to get through and utilize the skills they learn and for those skills to work. So again, it's going to be a hard work. It's not going to be a given. So I feel like all of those things have to be considered when we really want to work on ourselves and get ourselves to a different place from where we are. And again, it's not everybody's cup of tea, or it may take a little longer, just like you mentioned, that sometimes people have to be in the space of, I'm a victim and what happened to me and I need to grieve. I've been one of those people for a long time. And so getting out of that, I know it was uncomfortable and I know I didn't want to see it in that way. And I was big victim, for myself. And I was, but it's up to us. How do we choose to see ourselves? And if I don't like the way I live a life and I don't want to be in this role anymore, you don't have to. You can rise above it and you can change yourself, but it's not an easy process.
I think that's going to give a lot of people some relief. And I love what you said about victim, because I think it's being villainized a lot. People see it negatively. And we have the word and the meaning of victim for a reason. And you may need to be a victim for some time.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. So I wish people would stop saying, oh, they're a victim. They're in a victim mode. Well, yes, maybe that's a reason. It's serving them for now. And we're in no position to judge that. And so I think it's very unkind when I hear people saying, or, oh, well, they're just being a victim, because they are a victim at the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Nothing wrong with that. I think, and maybe for me, maybe I'm being unkind now, thinking, well, maybe only therapists will understand that. But most therapists don't say, "Oh, get out of victim mode." We know that there's a purpose of being a victim, and you'll be in it as long as you need to be. It could be saving you right now.
Yes. And I think it's also realization that something was done to you, right? And understanding that well, in my case, I actually wasn't aware I was a victim until later after I've had some sexual abuse. And after that, when I first spoke about it, and the person who was with me almost like stopped the car. It was a lady I worked with. She's like, do you know you've been through this, you've been abused? And I was like, I had no idea. Because sometimes we feel like it's a part of life. And I know a lot of people who get stuck in relationships where they are being victimized and they have all these problems, but they're not getting out of it because they don't know they are being victimized. And so I feel like it's very important to hit that rock bottom with understanding of what I am right now and what happened to me. And there should be no stigma, because we're going to have those experiences, whether big or small. But then what do we do from that point? We're going to stay and we have to understand what's happening, self-awareness, and then that willingness to say, you know what, I want to get out of here now. I think I'm getting ready to address that in a different way, because I don't want to be here anymore. But to not wanting to be there anymore, sometimes it takes time to be there for a while to see and to realize that, okay, I think I'm now getting ready to change what's happening. And I want to go through these experiences to feel better.
Thank you for that. And also thank you for sharing very important information about your life, because I think that's going to actually help a lot of people out there. So thank you for that.
Of course.
And I want to just quickly go back to the modality. So we talked about EMDR. CBT, you have touched upon as well. But I want to go to logotherapy, because I don't know if many people may understand. Maybe they do. I don't know. But can you give your perspective on? I love it because it's all about sort of the meaning of life kind of thing. And that's my thing. So tell us about logotherapy.
Yes, so it's beautiful, beautiful technique. It's from existential therapy approach, and it's been developed and created by Viktor Frankl. He's been through Holocaust, and the book Man's Search for Meaning. It's a very, very important book to read. I think for everybody who is struggling with trauma as well, to really see how people can change themselves after what they had to go through for years of absolutely horrific and dehumanizing type of experiences. And it's searching for meaning, and it's understanding and making a different agreement with your reality on how we look at it. And again, it takes a process. It takes time and processing, but it's very liberating to give a different meaning to what happened to us, or to find a different meaning, or to search for it, at least to start. And understanding that a lot of traumas can lead us to something much greater than what we could comprehend. And again, he wrote this book after being in the uh, Holocaust, right? Going through Holocaust. And after he came out of there, he was brewing this idea, and he was thinking about it, being a victim of, Nazis and the concentration camp. And it's a very powerful way of change your life in the future, I feel like. So if people are searching for that, I feel like existential approach, that's what we'll look at. Meaning of life. It doesn't matter what age you are. We can always find meaning in the worst experiences, whether it's childhood experiences, adolescents, or young adults, or seniors. And I work with a variety of people who begin to completely change agreement with the life they had, and they change it and they make sense of it. And then they want to come up with something that's becoming a baby from this traumatic experience for them. They're like, you know what? I was meant to do this because of the traumas I went through. I was meant to find this. And I feel like that's a powerful revelation for any of us who wants to change how we look at our trauma, or how we view our trauma. And what do we do next from there? Who are we becoming because of that?
That touches upon adversity as well, because a lot of trauma is experienced in adversity, being in particular. And you actually touched upon culture earlier when we talked about, you
Mm-hmm.
Russia and different things, but culture plays a part into even how you view therapy, and I love your example of, there's no such thing as mental illness. And I've seen that with other
Mm-hmm.
countries where people say, oh, there's no such thing as dementia. Nobody believes that. I've heard people actually say that from different countries. Culture is huge. And
Mm-hmm.
many cultures don't believe in talking therapies. This is why I like CBT as well. CBT is not a lot of talking therapy. You're going to be doing the work, you're going to be doing
Yes.
very specific things, and many people that suits them. So just touch upon, just for a moment, because a lot of people already know, but what is CBT and how can that
Mm-hmm.
also help?
Well, this comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, is seeing how our cognitions or beliefs create certain thought patterns that we have. And it's something that we think on a regular basis. And so the work that we're talking about is going to be depending on the person being willing and ready to scan their thoughts and see how do they respond to experiences, and what meaning they assign to certain situations that happen. And that meaning will create thought patterns. And from thoughts, we go into emotions, because all of the emotions are coming from our thoughts. If I think a certain way, that's what I'm going to feel. And when we feel a certain way, that's the actions that we take afterwards. So we look at this cognitive triangle where our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are interrelated and interconnected. And one and each of them is leading to another piece. And so understanding that, number one, recognizing how we feel when we think in a certain way, right? But it's all our work. I have to be very alert and aware of what's running through my mind on a regular basis, and what do I think on a regular basis. Sometimes we can get stuck with the past. If I'm thinking about the past, I can't get out of there. I feel bad. Of course you feel bad, because you're constantly bringing yourself to a place that you suffer a tremendous kind of negative, experience. So of course you're going to have feelings of depression and feeling low. And then that in turn can also create fatigue, lack of energy, right? We may want to stay in bed. That's the action. I'm not going to go and do that. I'm not going to go to this event because I don't feel well. But we're not feeling well because we're thinking about the experience that happened maybe, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and I'm still living in that experience. And now we know that our brain does not really distinguish something we're experiencing in reality or something that's just mental process. That's why we're able to enjoy movies. We're not watching movies saying, well, it's a special effect and this. No, we are immersed in this experience. That's why we get scared. That's why we cry with them. That's why we laugh with them, right? Our brain thinks that we are experiencing that in real life, and it gives us the emotions. And then we, may do a certain thing as well. Maybe we're more open to certain things because we just lived someone else's life through this show or a film. And so becoming more aware of what am I thinking about every single day and writing down. And that can also start from, if we're not yet aware of our thought process, I can say, okay, look at the experiences. Let's say when you feel heightened anxiety, what are you thinking about right now? Or when you feel depressed, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking about now? What are some thoughts that you experience? What is the self-talk, right? Sometimes it's self-talk, sometimes it's certain situation that we can be preoccupied with. But exploring that and then looking at what perspective is, and maybe trying to adopt a new perspective of that experience. Again, it's a time-consuming process, but that's the starting point of becoming more aware of what are my thoughts, because we are creatures of habits, and our thoughts are very habitual as well. So everything we do, even in our mind, even if it's not conscious at the moment, it's still a pattern. So what we're trying to get to is to identify this pattern, name it to tame it, right? Identify this pattern, and then starting to replace those thoughts in something else that can be giving us a little better feelings, for instance, or a different perspective that opens up new doors and gives us new opportunities of how we look at life as well. And that will change our emotions. And then it's going to change our behaviors. But it has to be a lot of work that people do on a regular basis of navigating their mental process and replacing thoughts, using thought stopping exercise and replacing, giving that new perspective that maybe you discovered with a therapist, maybe you came up by yourself. It all depends on, how that works for every single person. But that's the idea of, again, working on your thought process and then subsequently changing the emotions and behaviors as well.
Let's take a quick break from the show. And if you're enjoying today's episode of the Inquisitive Wren podcast, we'd love your support. Leaving a review, hitting that like button, and subscribing on your favorite platform not only helps us grow, but also ensures you never miss an inspiring conversation. Your comments mean the world to us. They spark new ideas, they connect us with incredible guests, and keep the energy flowing. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or watching on YouTube, or listening on your favorite platform, take a moment to share your thoughts and spread the word. Together, we're building a community that celebrates curiosity, growth, and transformation. Thank you for being a part of the Inquisitive Wren. Now, let's dive back into today's episode. Great explanation. If nobody's ever had CBT, it is fantastic. I've done that as well for a particular issue. That was like a one-off thing, and CBT really helped. I have to say, I was reluctant because when CBT first came out in the UK, nice guidelines, they pushed it and pushed it and put, this is a new therapy. This is going to be huge. We're only going to use this. And working therapists were like, come on, it's means tested. Yes, we need things that are tested, but it works. It works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's right for everyone. And I've certainly had people say, no, CBT is not for me. And that's fine. Just on the whole modalities bit as well, we touched upon spirituality. And I wanted to ask your thoughts. Now, we hear people say, oh, I'm not spiritual, I'm religious, or the vice versa. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Does it even matter in your practice what people believe, what everything, when you think, yes, I need to bring in some energy healing with this, or I need to bring in some kind of thought process around the meaning, what they think, the mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit. What are your thoughts about that? Does it matter?
Well, I think what matters is your spiritual or religious belief is giving you empowerment, hope, and strength. I feel like that's the most important part. So whatever works, when you work it, just go for that. The idea is, I feel like, and the most important part is, number one, feeling good from your beliefs, because I also know a lot of people who may not feel good and they can see themselves as sinners, and that comes from a very rigid kind of religious perspective. Again, we're all entitled to our opinions, but I feel like those things we utilize in our faith should bring us strength and empowerment. And if not, again, maybe we should explore that a little bit more, right? If people are open to that, there's absolutely no pressure at all when it comes to those topics. But I also know a lot of people who can cite a Bible, but they never experience God. And so for me, that's also a very kind of conflicting moment, because our spirituality and religion ultimately have to bring us inside and have to teach us this essence that we all have. It doesn't matter what we call it. There's one teacher that he changed my life forever. I feel like Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he talks often about this essence of who we are. And when we call it God, Allah, Buddha, whatever we want to call it, if we call water aqua, vada, Wasser, right? There's aqua, water has many different names, but we don't get wet from the word water. We get wet from the substance. And so is the spirituality and religion. There is that essence, and the essence of understanding of that's within ourselves, that's a part of everything. And I feel like through all of this means, it's important to come to understanding that we're all one, and that there's something that's in every one of us, and in every plant, and in every tree. And so that's exactly why we're not thinking about our next breath, right? We trust this process. We're not trying to gasp for air, or when we eat or drink water, it goes in. We don't think about how am I going to digest it. That's that consciousness that's living inside of you that helps this body to work. And then one day your body will be without that consciousness, and you're not going to be able to take that next breath. So where do you go? Because you're definitely not staying in this body. And I feel like the more we use different spiritual tools, or different, maybe going to church or our practices, I feel like it's very important to find that peace, because ultimately peace is what we need. And sometimes it's meditation. That's spirituality too. It's disconnecting from the mind and finding that essence within yourself. And that's a very empowering practice as well. Mindfulness can also be a spiritual tool. So there's so many different ways of how we look at that. And I feel like implementing that can bring a lot of peace and empowerment and strength if it's used wisely.
And are you finding that in your practice, people are more open to exploring that aspect of themselves?
Yes, because if we only look at life from human perspective, we're gonna suffer, because there's always that pain, right? We have the pain from the experience, and suffering, it's the layer right on top of that we don't have to have, but we may choose to have that for one reason or another. And I feel like if we get out of the limiting human perspective and try to see the things from a little wider or a bigger picture, I feel like we make more sense out of it. And that comes usually from utilizing the spiritual concepts, whether it's from religion or not, regardless, but just being more aware of a little broader kind of the bigger picture of who we are and why we're here.
Overall, it sounds like you're saying, look, there are certain things you can do depending on if you want to do them. So that brings me to the question, what do you think? I've always believed that if somebody wants to stop doing something, a behavior, a negative action, a word, if somebody has a habit, something they do, or an emotional state that they constantly put themselves in because you are doing it to yourself, you're choosing to do it. It may be automatic, but it's become a habit now, and it's a part of you. A lot of people say, no, but they push my buttons. Somebody can push your buttons, but it doesn't mean you have to react. So once we get past that, I've always believed if you really want to change something, you will. And what would you say to people who may think, well, actually, I really want to stop doing this, but I can't. I find I can't do it. What's happening there?
Yeah, it's limiting beliefs that we have, about ourselves and our capabilities. The only thing is that people change all the time. We see people change. I feel like there's this quote by Albert Einstein, and he says you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. So if you're in the same kind of state of being, right, the same emotions, the same thought patterns, yes, you can't, and you're right. But if you start to maybe get more educated, I'm not saying educated meaning getting education, reading books, reading stories, reading people, how people change and what they changed and their ways, and finding things that may work for you, not one single kind of philosophy will work for you, but you're making a puzzle piece, right? You have to use different techniques and different things that work specifically for you in order to get to a new place and get new information too. And that comes again, I love to read books. I have a big collection of audiobooks, and that was my healing process, starting my own healing journey. There was nobody there for me but me to start changing those things. And sometimes that takes guts to say, I'm not going to listen to music that's triggering my old emotion. I'm not going to waste time anymore in watching this, cheap type of series. No, no, no judgment, but I feel like certain things are not enriching you, or thinking, okay, is this practice that I'm doing, is it making me better? Is it healing or killing me? I like to use this word. Is it healing you or killing you? And if it's not healing you, why are you doing that? Right? Easier said than done. But then again, we're going into willingness and readiness stage when you say, you know what? If one person did it, if they were able to get out of this habit or this state or this experience, so can I. Because if one person can do something, you can too. And so I feel like changing that perspective and first starting seeing that, yeah, people change and they do it all the time. I can. Maybe it's not now, but bringing yourself to the time when you will say, okay, now is the time, and everything will align. And if I have a very solid decision within myself, it's not going to be such a tedious process either. It's going to come with more ease than me forcing myself at a time when I'm not yet ready. I mean, be just willing, but I'm not ready. And that's going to be torture. And we get stuck in that misery rather than looking at the time when I'm looking back and saying, I want to put my mind, my attention on the moment in the future when I will look back and say, oh my God, I've done it. And it's so cool now. I'm so healed from that. But I feel like we are often, if we're not ready, we often get stuck in this negative narrative of, I can't do it. It's so hard. It's going to take a long time. And we have all of these excuses, this little voice that's continued to nag on us and tell us that we're not capable of that. We have to find another voice that's within ourselves and looking at the things we did accomplish. Maybe that can help as well. Say, you know what? I actually overcame some really rough experiences from my past and I did it. So this, is it really that big or not? Because I feel like we forget when we overcome something so serious in the past. And then now we have this little problem and we're so preoccupied that I'm not going to be able to, or I can't, or it's going to be hard. And that's what this obstacles, this thought patterns do. And that's where cognitive behavioral therapy can come upon as well and say, no, I can't, because other people can. Why can't I? How am I less than, And that can start that healing process as well, slowly but surely. The more we repeat that, the better it's going to sink in, because with every new thought, we have new neuroplasticity as well. So I feel like that's important to realize that new thoughts also lead to physiological changes, whether it's the brain or neural networks, right? So everything is connected. We forget that we're one entire system. It's not just, we're not going just to the doctor for physical concern and healing that, because a lot of physical problems start with our traumas too and life experiences. So I feel like it's important to address the whole being that we are.
Yes, we're back to mind, body, spirit. Absolutely. Always the whole. And I like what you were saying about that, because there is resistance. People will be resistant. We all have resistance at some point. And it doesn't mean you won't change if you're in resistance at the moment. It only means, I believe, that whatever you're doing is serving you still. It's serving a part of you still. Now, whether we work out what part of you that is, and maybe we have worked it out, maybe it's right on the table, we've laid it right out for you. Your therapist has shown you exactly what it is, but you still struggle with it, and that means you're not ready to let go of it. Then that will touch upon, for me, I was asking you about what are the biggest misconceptions in therapy. For me, one of the biggest misconceptions in therapy or about therapy is that if somebody's not changing, or if there's no result in what they're trying to change, that it's the therapist's fault, or that they're unfixable, that they will always have this problem, that it was been a waste of time. I see things on social media saying, I've spent $100,000 on therapy and I'm still smoking, or I'm still doing this, or I'm still biting my nails, or I've seen these posts, and what can I say? It's, you're not ready. You're not there yet. You
Yeah.
want to, yeah, it's nice that you've given the therapist that money, but you do have to pay for services. You do realize that. But, so there's
Yeah.
so much packed into all of that. But that
Mhm.
for me is a big misconception that
Mhm.
you're unfixable more than it's a therapist's fault. I think most people know that this is all about you. It's not about the therapist, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've had actually, well, when it comes to, again, therapist's fault, I would say this, well, maybe it's not the right therapist, right? Again, maybe you need a different
Absolutely.
person with different
Absolutely.
modalities. That's number one. Number two, I don't take credit for either success or failure. So it's all what people do and how do we get out? How do they get out of it? It's all their thing because I'm giving the same thing to everybody, or I mean, the same what I know I'm giving to every single person. But whether they take it and run with that, or whether they look at it and say, I don't know, I don't want to give it a try, right? Because sometimes we don't want to give it a try. And when it comes to people being unfixable, I actually had clients who received that feedback from professionals, and I was in shock to see that someone can give them this idea that's completely so wrong. I can't even, it's so wrong. There's no such thing that someone being unfixable. There's no such thing. People change all the time. Maybe right now it's not the time for you. Maybe it's not the right professional either. But that's such a terrible thing to say to someone about themselves. I feel like that's very cruel and very unprofessional altogether. But so, yeah, if they receive that feedback, that's great. They definitely should not reach out to the same person who gave them that feedback. Or if they're thinking about themselves, again, look around. People change. Men's search for meaning. Viktor Frankl, this guy went through, the worst experience anybody can go through, and he is, he was a great individual that contributed greatly to the field of psychology with his own example, not just his works. So I feel like if we open ourselves up to different people that made it happen, and right now we have wonderful, and giants in the field, as well as regular people who went through some horror stories and rose above it, and just opening ourselves up to ideas of change and listening to stories that are positive, because it's also very easy to get sidetracked and go into the stories where other people will say, yeah, I couldn't fix this, that wasn't solvable, that was a problem, because there are people like that too. But it's our choice. Who do I listen to? Am I going to look, I'm taking this and say, well, I can't change, and these people, they can't change, so it's impossible. Or I say, well, I can change, and I know these people say they can't change, but I see this person who succeeded, so how did they do that? Let me see. And then maybe you find another story and say, well, this person does it. So people quit smoking all the time. And so you are not different. You can do it. If they did it, you can do it. Nobody is special in that regard.
You're exactly right. But for some people, that serves them to think that, you know what, it's just me, I'm unfixable. I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Nothing can help me. It's the ego and it's separation, and it makes you special. That you see, I went to 10 therapists and nobody could help me, kind of thing. I think this is a really good place to end, where we're really talking about infinity, and we're really talking about your lifetime here on the earth plane, and how you might be able to make it easier. As you were just saying, you may be able to make it easier for yourself better by having those positive thoughts, but bringing it down to earth kind of thing, the earthly side. Um, if you're struggling out there and you think, okay, I'm not sure if it's trauma, I don't know what it is, I haven't had a bad childhood, but nothing's going right. As Elisa's outlined through the interview, nothing has to be really, really wrong, bad, or anything, but you could be feeling out of place. Maybe have a chat with Elisa. All of her details will be in the show notes, website. Have a look at her social media too, and maybe just have an initial chat. Now, do you see people, do you do online therapy?
Yes, absolutely. And consultation can be for free if you want to connect, for sure. I'm available. That's what I'm here for. So I would provide any referrals or resources that I possibly can, and my time, of course. So yes.
Wonderful. And even if it's just about EMDR or something that you, because you can do that
Mhm.
online as well, something
Yes.
that you just have questions about, reach out to her. I'm sure you won't mind answering a few questions or touching upon a few things if people have questions. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're
Mhm.
doing. Mind, body, soul, the spirit, however you choose, I think it's all the same. uh, Connection is so important, and you have beautifully put it all together in an easy to understand, easy to digest way for people. And I thank you for that. Continue to do the work you're doing,
Thank you.
and thank you. Your mental health is a priority. Nine Peaches Therapies offers gentle and soothing therapy for your mind, body, and soul. These self-help recordings focus on improving the quality of your life by providing you what you need right now, be it confidence, positivity, restful sleep, or relaxation. The soothing, calming music has been specially composed to accompany the body of words created by me, an expert in this field, to help you to achieve the best result. Reprogram your mind using the most gentle and effective guided meditations that can help you to clear and cleanse any unwanted energy that may be negatively affecting your life. Improve the quality of your life in just a few minutes a day. Nine Peaches Therapies, Holistic Therapeutic Consultancy. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Inquisitive Wren podcast. I hope you found it insightful. If you did, I'd love for you to share it with a friend who might enjoy it too. Don't forget to share it on social media. It really helps us reach more people who resonate with our content. If you haven't already, make sure to follow the show. It's the best way to stay connected and help our Inquisitive Wren community grow. I'd also love to hear from you. Leave a rating and a review to let me know your thoughts, and be sure to follow so you never miss the latest episodes or behind the scenes content from the Inquisitive Wren. Thanks again, and as always, stay curious.